Have you ever been humiliated? Not just teased or criticized, but truly, publicly humiliated? That moment when your skin prickles, your chest tightens, and the room seems to tilt. You feel everyone's eyes pressing into you like tiny daggers, and yet no one rushes to your defense. You stand alone, your dignity bleeding out silently onto the cold floor of indifference. Maybe it was at work, maybe in front of friends, or perhaps by someone you trusted. And in that split second, you had a choice. A choice that most people don't realize they're making. Some swallow the shame, wear a polite smile, and pretend it didn't matter. Some retaliate immediately, their rage clumsy and loud, making them seem weak in their desperation. But a rare few, those who understand the cold, calculating laws of human nature, respond differently. They do nothing, at least not immediately. They watch, they wait, and then, when the time is right, they strike. Machiavelli would say, never strike when you're emotional, never retaliate when it costs you your power. Revenge is a dish best served when your opponent least expects it, when it brings you advantage, not just momentary satisfaction. But before we go further, you need to understand something fundamental about power, human weakness, and the art of preserving your dignity in a world eager to take it from you. What if I told you that humiliation isn't the loss you think it is? That, in the eyes of history's most cunning minds, it's a moment pregnant with opportunity, and that by responding instinctively, emotionally, you destroy that opportunity? What if every time you felt humiliated, you were unknowingly being invited into a private lesson on power, manipulation, and control? You see, Niccolò Machiavelli, the 16th century Florentine diplomat and philosopher, wasn't interested in what people should do according to morality or virtue. He was interested in what people actually do, how they lie, cheat, betray, flatter, and destroy for personal gain. His book, The Prince, wasn't a handbook for saints. It was a survival manual for those surrounded by wolves. And humiliation? It's one of the oldest power plays in human history. A subtle test, a provocation, an attempt to expose your emotional weakness. Because whoever controls your emotional reactions controls you. And if you don't master this, it won't matter how intelligent, talented, or good-hearted you are. You will remain at the mercy of lesser people who understand one thing better than you: how to control appearances. So today, we dive deep into what Machiavelli would advise you to do when someone humiliates you. This isn't about petty revenge. It's about power, control, dignity, and how to turn moments of public defeat into the seeds of future triumph. We'll explore the psychology of humiliation, why it hurts so much and why it happens, how power dynamics play out in public confrontations, the Machiavellian principle of appearance over truth, why immediate retaliation is weakness disguised as courage, and most importantly, what to do strategically and silently. When you've been humiliated, I'm going to tell you stories of emperors, courtiers, and politicians who were publicly shamed, only to rise from the ashes because they followed this timeless principle. And by the end of this, you'll never respond to public shame the same way again. In fact, you'll be quietly thankful it happened. Because in Machiavelli's world, and in ours, the greatest opportunities for power are born in moments of loss. You just have to know how to use them. So, have you ever been humiliated? Do you remember how you responded? Would you like to know what you should have done instead? Then stay with me, because what comes next will make you see those moments not as defeats, but as invitations to greatness. Humiliation is an ancient weapon. It's older than kingdoms, older than war itself. Before swords, before guns, before armies, men battled for dominance through public shame. A single word, a cutting look, an insinuation made in front of others, it could destroy a man standing faster than any blade. And why? Because human beings are social creatures, hardwired for status and reputation. To be humiliated is not simply to be embarrassed. It's to lose standing in the tribe. In primitive times, it meant death. To lose respect meant to be exiled from the group, left to starve, to be devoured by predators, to wither in obscurity. Today, exile looks different. You won't be thrown into the wilderness, but you'll feel it in other ways. People avoid you. Opportunities dry up. Whispered jokes when you leave the room. A subtle coldness. In the game of social standing, humiliation is a death sentence for the careless. But here's where Machiavelli offers a counterintuitive insight. Humiliation, if handled wisely, is a weapon you can turn against your enemy. It's a moment where power is in flux, and the person who remains calm, measured, and strategic in those moments can reclaim not just their dignity, but increase their influence. Why does humiliation feel so unbearable? Because it strikes at three of our most primal needs: status, our place in the social hierarchy, belonging, our connection to others, control, our ability to manage how others see us. Psychologists call this social pain, and according to studies, the brain registers it in much the same way as physical pain. In fact, brain scans show that the anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for processing physical pain, also lights up during moments of social rejection and humiliation. Evolution designed us this way because our ancestors' survival depended on their social standing. A caveman banished from his tribe had a lower chance of survival than one with friends and allies. This is why insults cut so deep, and why we instinctively crave immediate retaliation. But that's where most people make their fatal mistake. They react impulsively, blinded by anger. And in doing so, they give their enemy exactly what they wanted: visible proof that they are weak, emotional, and easily manipulated. Machiavelli argued in The Prince that how people perceive you matters far more than who you truly are. A ruler may be kind or cruel in private, but what matters is the image he projects to his subjects. Likewise, in social dynamics, the truth of your feelings is irrelevant. What matters is the performance you give to the watching crowd. When someone humiliates you publicly, they're not just attacking you, they're staging a performance for others. The audience watches to see how you will respond, and your reaction will either confirm the humiliator's power or quietly, subtly, undermine it. The key is understanding this is never about justice. It's about control over appearances. In ancient Rome, two towering figures clashed repeatedly: Julius Caesar, the charismatic populist, and Cato the Younger, a stubborn defender of the old republic. Cato, known for his moral rigidity, humiliated Caesar in the Senate several times, mocking his policies and questioning his integrity in front of other senators. And Caesar? He never took the bait. He smiled. He made a self-deprecating joke. He brushed it off. To the audience, Caesar appeared magnanimous, unbothered, a man above petty insults. But behind closed doors, he quietly undermined Cato's alliances, outmaneuvered him politically, and won the loyalty of Rome's masses. By the time Caesar crossed the Rubicon and took power, Cato's public humiliations were long forgotten. And Cato? He died by suicide as the Republic collapsed. Lesson: the immediate sting of humiliation is temporary. The strategic response can be eternal. Most people believe that striking back immediately shows strength, that standing up for yourself in the moment asserts dominance. But Machiavelli would argue the opposite. Emotional retaliation is weakness because it reveals you are controlled by others. If your enemy can provoke you into rage or tears with a simple remark, they own you. As the saying goes, never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. Machiavelli believed that power belongs to those who control themselves, and by extension, the narrative. The person who can swallow a public insult and maintain composure is not weak. They're terrifying, because no one knows what they're thinking. They could be plotting anything. A fascinating study from Stanford University demonstrated that people who delay their reactions to provocation are perceived as more powerful and authoritative than those who react instantly. In simulated workplace conflicts, participants rated calm, composed individuals as better leaders, more trustworthy, and ultimately more intimidating than those who argued emotionally. Why? Because control signals dominance. And dominance is magnetic. The calm person becomes an enigma. The crowd wonders what they're planning. Fear fills the silence. Machiavelli's advice for rulers, and for us, was simple: never let your enemy see you bleed. Never retaliate publicly if it costs you power. Wait, and strike when it brings you advantage. This requires immense discipline, because everything in you will scream to defend your dignity. But dignity isn't preserved in the moment. It's restored in the long game. In 2011, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, then-President Barack Obama publicly mocked Donald Trump over his birther conspiracy theories. The crowd laughed. Trump scowled. He didn't argue. He didn't storm out. He said nothing. But insiders claim it was that moment that galvanized Trump's presidential ambitions. 5 years later, Trump took Obama's job. The world forgot the joke, but Trump remembered the humiliation. Lesson: the world loves a winner, not a loud victim. Whenever someone humiliates you in public, three parties are involved: the humiliator, you, the audience, and it's the audience who holds real power, because their perception decides who wins. If you react emotionally, the audience sides with the humiliator, who appears in control. If you remain calm, smile, or make a graceful deflection, the audience turns their attention to you, wondering why you're so unshaken. Doubt creeps in about the humiliator's power. Silence unsettles people more than outrage. Because silence is unpredictable. Here's the paradox Machiavelli would want you to understand. When someone humiliates you, they believe they've taken something from you. But in truth, they've given you something. They've exposed their hand. They've revealed their insecurity. And most importantly, they've shown you where they believe your weakness lies. This is intelligence, a gift, because the man who humiliates you publicly reveals two things. Where he thinks you're vulnerable, his need to assert dominance publicly, which is itself a sign of inner weakness. A strong, secure person does not need to humiliate others. When someone publicly undermines you, it is a loud announcement of their fear or envy. Machiavelli would urge you to see this moment not as an attack, but as an opportunity to observe, to take note, to quietly begin planning. The crowd will forget the insult, but you should remember, because power belongs to those who can weaponize memory. It's human nature to want to explain yourself when shamed or belittled, to protest. That's not true, or you misunderstood me. But in Machiavelli's world, and in the world of power dynamics, this instinct is deadly. Why? Because the moment you defend yourself, you accept the premise of the attack. You legitimize your opponent's power by acting as though their words carry weight. In fact, silence, or graceful indifference, does far more to disarm a humiliator than protest ever could. As Machiavelli writes in The Prince, men should either be treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries. For heavy ones, they cannot. The meaning here is brutal but wise. If you can't obliterate your enemies standing immediately and decisively, it's better to do nothing at all, at least in public. To react softly is to bleed slowly. A 2019 study from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology explored how self-control influences status in social groups. In controlled experiments, individuals who responded calmly and strategically to insults and provocations were consistently rated as higher status, more leader-like, and ultimately more powerful than those who reacted emotionally. Interestingly, even when the calm individual was technically defeated in the moment, observers instinctively sided with them long-term because their self-mastery implied deeper strength. Lesson: people are drawn to those who seem unshaken. They sense power in restraint. One of Machiavelli's most subtle tactics was the idea of feigned ignorance. When insulted, humiliated, or criticized, he would sometimes act as though he hadn't even noticed, or respond with a kind word, a smile, a gesture of generosity. This deeply unsettles the aggressor, because when someone humiliates you, they crave a reaction. When you deny them that, and worse, when you appear oblivious to the insult, you communicate supreme confidence. And to the audience, it appears as though the attack was so insignificant, so beneath you, that it didn't even register. This is devastating for the aggressor's ego, and it elevates your standing. When young Napoleon Bonaparte was a rising officer in the French army, senior generals mocked his Corsican accent and humble origins behind his back, and occasionally to his face. He knew this, but rather than retaliating with anger or public defense, Napoleon would pretend not to hear. He responded with compliments, small acts of generosity, or indifference. And when he rose to command armies and later crowned himself Emperor of France, those same men who once mocked him knelt before him. Lesson: the best revenge is not in words, but in undeniable assent. Your greatest humiliation today can be the seed of your authority tomorrow. If you remain disciplined, here's the part you'll hate to hear. Most people's default reactions to humiliation only empower their enemies. When you lash out in anger, defend yourself, desperately seek public validation through complaints or sympathy, you confirm the humiliator's control over you. The crowd sees you as emotionally fragile. Your enemy sees you as predictable. And worst of all, you see yourself as a victim. Machiavelli would argue, there's no greater humiliation than to humiliate yourself. And that's exactly what uncontrolled emotional reactions do. Now, for a truly Machiavellian move that only the coldest, most strategic minds can pull off, when someone humiliates you, find a way, quietly, subtly, to thank them. Not literally, but through your behavior. How? By using that insult as fuel. Improve where they mocked you. Grow stronger in the area they sought to expose. And then let the world witness your transformation. Because nothing unsettles a tormentor more than realizing they inadvertently made you more dangerous. It's not revenge through retaliation. It's revenge through evolution. There's a deeper philosophical truth Machiavelli understood, and it mirrors the teachings of Stoic philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. Humiliation only stings because of your attachment to ego. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The insult itself is powerless. It's your belief in its power that hurts you. And Machiavelli's genius lay in recognizing this, not to preach moral superiority, but to leverage it strategically. When you master your ego, you become untouchable. The world can whisper, mock, or insult, and you, like the great rulers of history, will walk through the storm untouched. Here's the truth no one wants to admit. Most people don't need others to humiliate them. They do it to themselves. Every day, quietly, subtly. We humiliate ourselves when we apologize for things we didn't do. We laugh nervously at jokes made at our expense. We shrink in the presence of louder voices. We betray our values for approval. We chase validation from those who secretly despise us, and society prefers it that way. Because a world of self-doubting, easily controlled people is easy to rule. And Machiavelli, with his brutal honesty, understood this better than anyone. It doesn't take public insults to humiliate a man. A clever enemy can humiliate you without saying a word. How? By forcing you into obedient silence when you should speak, agreement when you disagree, false smiles when you're seething inside. The modern world calls this professionalism or being polite. But Machiavelli would call it what it is: submission disguised as civility. Most people aren't humiliated by enemies. They're humiliated by their own cowardice. You've been told since childhood, be the bigger person. Ignore insults. Take the high road. But Machiavelli would warn you, that road often leads nowhere. Yes, immediate emotional retaliation is foolish, but endless tolerance is equally destructive. Why? Because when you tolerate disrespect without consequence, you teach the world how to treat you. You normalize your own humiliation. There's a difference between strategic patience and learned helplessness. And most people, convinced they're being virtuous, quietly reinforce their own insignificance by refusing to ever push back, even when the moment is right. In Machiavellian strategy, tolerance without eventual consequence signals weakness. In power dynamics, humiliation serves a hidden function. It's a test, an initiation into the inner circle of influence. In history, kings and leaders would mock or test their potential allies, generals, or heirs in public, watching to see who could maintain composure. The ones who reacted emotionally were discarded as unfit for leadership. The ones who endured, smiled, and quietly plotted their ascent. Those were the future commanders. Modern workplaces, social cliques, and political circles work no differently. The passive-aggressive remark in a meeting, the mocking nickname, the exclusion from certain conversations. These are tests. And if you can endure without visible weakness and respond at the right time, you rise. But most people fail because their egos scream for immediate satisfaction. Here's the sinister part. The humiliation isn't for you. It's for the audience. The person trying to shame you doesn't care about your feelings. They care about how others perceive their power over you. And the real threat isn't the insult. It's the shift in the room. The smirks, the subtle glances, the small, imperceptible movements in status. Social power is transferred in these moments, and the audience decides who wins. This is why your reaction matters far more than the insult itself. Even if the insult is cruel, even if it burns, if you control your face, your body, your words, you control the room. This is perhaps the most unsettling truth Machiavelli might reveal. People are drawn to humiliation because it relieves them of responsibility. When you're publicly humiliated or made small, you no longer have to act. You have an excuse to stay passive, to nurse your wounds, to tell yourself you were treated unfairly. It's easier to feel like a victim than to bear the burden of ambition. And many people unconsciously provoke humiliation so they can avoid the terrifying freedom of power. Machiavelli would argue that most people remain peasants in the kingdom of life not because of oppression, but because of their own preference for safety over sovereignty. Psychologist Martin Seligman's studies on learned helplessness in the 1960s revealed that when animals or humans are subjected to repeated, uncontrollable negative situations, they eventually stop trying to escape, even when escape becomes possible. In one experiment, dogs placed in cages where they were periodically shocked eventually stopped trying to avoid the shocks. Even when the cage door was opened, they lay passively, accepting their fate. This mirrors the behavior of people who endure public shame or daily micro-humiliations without ever pushing back. They become conditioned to believe they have no power. They forget they can leave the room, refuse the insult, or reclaim their dignity. And society, made of governments, corporations, institutions, and fragile egos, benefits from this learned passivity. Because docile citizens, employees, and subjects are easier to rule. Machiavelli understood a cold fact about human nature. People value what they are forced to respect. If you never defend your dignity, strategically, not emotionally, no one will defend it for you. The world watches how you treat yourself. And when you allow humiliation to pass without consequence forever, you train the world to see you as insignificant. Not because you are, but because you've shown them you accept insignificance. This doesn't mean reckless revenge. It means selective, calculated response when the time benefits you today. Humiliation doesn't always look like public insults. It's often institutional. Job titles that reduce your worth. Unpaid overtime disguised as team spirit. Silencing opinions through corporate speak. Awarding mediocrity while ignoring brilliance. It's a society that humiliates the individual by pretending to celebrate them, while quietly stripping away autonomy. And Machiavelli's warning was clear. In systems like this, those who remain silent are devoured first. And now, the most unsettling truth of all. Humiliation isn't just something that happens to you. It's something you unconsciously agree to. Yes, every time someone shamed you publicly. Every time you bit your tongue, laughed nervously, lowered your gaze, or walked away defeated. A part of you allowed it. Not because you're weak, not because you lack courage, but because you didn't know the rules of the game. And that's precisely how the powerful maintain control, by keeping most people ignorant of how power actually works. Here's the Machiavellian paradox. The man who is humiliated and responds with instant anger loses power. The man who is humiliated and responds with meekness forfeits it. But the man who endures the insult, takes note, and strikes later when it benefits him, that man becomes untouchable. And if no opportunity for retaliation ever comes, then the insult dies quietly, forgotten by the world, while you remain standing, your dignity intact in the eyes of those who matter. Because Machiavelli knew a secret, power belongs not to those who win every battle, but to those who choose which battles to fight. The greatest rulers in history didn't react to every insult. They ignored minor slights and exacted devastating revenge only when it served their long game. And here's the final twist. Your dignity is not what people do to you. It's what you allow to be taken. Humiliation, then, isn't a defeat. It's an audition for power. A test to see whether you deserve a place among those who command, rather than obey. And most people fail. They react like slaves to their emotions. But if you, right now, can remember this principle the next time someone tries to shame you, and you remain calm, you withhold retaliation, you control your face, your tone, your posture, you will terrify them. Because they will see something most men lack: mastery over self. And mastery over self is the first step to mastery over others. This is the law of power Machiavelli whispered into the ears of princes, emperors, and kings. And now, I whisper it to you. You will be humiliated again. It's inevitable, but this time, you'll know what to do. Now you know. What was once a moment of personal shame is now a signal, a strategic opportunity, a test, not of your worth, but of your discipline. And you will face it again. Someone will mock you in a meeting. A so-called friend will humiliate you in front of others. A stranger online will attempt to strip your dignity. And in that moment, you'll remember this. Because Machiavelli's wisdom isn't just for princes. It's for anyone navigating a world where appearances are currency, where power is perception, and where the crowd always watches. So, what do you do the next time someone humiliates you? Do not react emotionally. This is the foundation. Whether it's a cutting remark, public criticism, or passive-aggressive slight, control your face, your voice, and your body language. A man who appears unshaken is instantly more powerful. Take note, not revenge, yet remember, retaliation in the heat of emotion is weakness. Instead, store the moment. Remember who did it, how they did it, and who was watching. Humiliation exposes your enemy's insecurities and fears. Use that information wisely. Maintain appearances if appropriate. Laugh lightly. Make a neutral or self-deprecating joke. Or act as though you didn't hear it. Nothing unsettles an aggressor more than seeing their attack land with no visible impact. Strike strategically, if advantageous, when an opportunity presents itself later, in private, or when the power dynamic has shifted. Act if it serves your interests. But if it doesn't, let it die. The world forgets insults. Dignity outlasts them. Control the narrative if others bring up the incident. Remain gracious, calm, and dismissive. The more you act as though it's beneath your concern, the more you own the room. Humiliation hurts because the ego craves validation. But as Marcus Aurelius reminded us, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. In this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Machiavelli didn't preach virtue for its own sake. He valued mastery. And the first, hardest mastery is mastery over oneself. Because the man who cannot command himself will never command anything else. This is why every instance of public shame is a sacred opportunity. Not for revenge, not for righteous indignation, but for training. A reminder to sharpen your composure, to refine your strategy, and to observe the world's small tyrants reveal themselves. So now, I leave you with a question. When was the last time someone humiliated you? How did you respond? Did you react emotionally? Did you shrink? Or did you hold your ground, control your face, and quietly decide what would happen next? If you could rewind that moment, what would you do differently now? Drop your story in the comments below. Not for sympathy, but as a declaration of how you'll handle it the next time. Because there will be a next time. That's how life works. But now, you won't face it as a victim. You'll face it as a student of power, a disciple of self-mastery, a strategist in a world of impulsive men. And whether you choose to retaliate or to rise quietly above it, you'll know what Machiavelli always knew. The world belongs to those who command themselves. If this struck something deep in you, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to remember who they really are. Because power is no longer reserved for kings. It's for anyone with the discipline to claim it.